I've been married for over 11 years to my best friend and better half. And I wanted to share some of the tips and tools we've used to get to 11 years and to have a healthy relationship that we've worked very hard on. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private practice where we've worked with over 2,000 carnivore clients and patients, helping them get to root cause healing, which often starts with the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet. Today, I just wanted to talk about the relationship I have with my dear husband, Kevin, who does a lot of the behind the scenes work for the Nutrition with Judy practice. A lot of times I get asked how we make it work with everything that we have going on. We also have two young boys. The oldest is 9 years old. And we are asked, how does it all work? In this conversation, I wanted to share some of the tools I've used and areas to look into and consider to build strong relationships, because in holistic health, relationships are so fundamental to have optimal healing. There was a Harvard study done, no judgment on Harvard studies, but assuming that this Harvard study was a high quality one, it followed people for over 80 some odd years, and they found that the key ingredient for people to live long and have this joyful, loving life was their relationships. It was their ability. And one of the main questions they asked is, do you have somebody that you can call at 3 a.m. when you're suffering, maybe you're sick, and that you can call them and ask for help? And many people, even though they're married, were not able to say yes. And that question is so important to consider when you're trying to heal. How strong of a foundation of relationships and community do you have around you so that you can call one person, if not more, at 3 a.m. when you actually need help? So the first thing I want to bring up is boundaries. I read a book by Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, and it's all about boundaries. All the information I bring up, studies, books, content, I will put it in the show notes. But in that book, they talk about the importance of boundaries, and it's written in a very biblical way. Because for me, growing up in a Korean Christian household, I was told to love my neighbor no matter what. And if I had an enemy or anything, that I would have to go and resolve that issue first before I continued on. And so I had to love people that even though it didn't make sense. And later on, then I learned about narcissists. But I think reading that book opened my eyes to that actually Jesus even had boundaries too. And there were times where he would take time for solitude, where he would be away from his disciples, or he would say no in healing, where in certain places he would just heal one person instead of everybody that was around the bathhouse. There were many examples where he would go a different way because he knew that it was not worth the fight in going in a certain way because he had enemies. I highly recommend reading the book if you feel oftentimes that you do things out of guilt, where the church asks you, or people ask you, or your children ask you, or your family asks you to do things, and you really want to say no, or no, I don't really have time, but you say yes because you feel bad or you feel guilty. And I think that book really opened my eyes to how it is important to have boundaries, because if you don't have boundaries for yourself and you don't respect yourself in that way, then no one else will. And so people will always ask. And oftentimes we see in chronic illness that the people that cannot say no are the ones that get sick, because eventually the body gives way. Now, there are ways to say no. You don't just say, no, this is against my boundaries, and so I say no. I mean, of course, you could do it that way, but the goal would be that you can say no gracefully. So you can always say, you know what, I'll check my calendar. Or, oh, you know what, this week I don't think I could do it because of XYZ reasons. And the power to really take back is the ability to say no and keep the priority. And so oftentimes that's having to say no to things. Between us, I get asked to go on podcasts. And while sometimes I say yes, I do find it as an honor, but I have to think of what is the bigger goal that the Nutrition with Judy practice is trying to achieve this year. And if the interviews don't fit that goal, then I have to say no. And oftentimes I have to say no to many things. And the busier you get, the more you have family members and loved ones in your life, you will have to say no more often. And for us in our family, we look at where do we say no? And sometimes I want to say no, but for our older child, he may want to go to that event. And so it's finding this balance while having boundaries, and then finding ways to say no with grace. So sometimes maybe I have to work on something really important, but Caleb, my oldest son, wants to go somewhere. So maybe the balance is that my husband, Kevin, will take him. And so he gets to go and I still get to work on things. This is how we find ways to have boundaries, but still be able to meet all of our needs. One other thing we do about boundaries is to really protect our island. Our Cho family, it is the most important thing to me that we always put the priority and the needs of our family first. And so if whatever we are marching towards does not fit that and the values that we instill in our little dynamic, we may have to pivot from that other thing. So we are very protective of our little island. And then we try to move as a unit to, again, have that boundary as a family and collective. And so this is obviously where, well, how do you know what the collective thoughts are without communication? And that's where communication is so, so important. So the second thing I would bring up is communication. Kevin and I talk a lot together. I mean, yes, we work together too, but we talk, well, he probably says I talk more, which is probably true, but I share a lot of my feelings. And I'm sure he's listening half the time, half-heartedly, but he listens and we find a way to make sure our needs are met. It is not easy to share your deepest, darkest feelings and communicate, but we have 11 years of butting heads, not feeling like our needs are being met, and then just talking to each other to really be on the same page. And sometimes we're so charged that we have to just take a step away and we will have time to cool down and not say things that we can never take back or we regret, and for the other person it's a scar forever. And so we try to be mindful of when I know that Kevin's at the point where he's really upset, I take it in and I just hold my tongue until he's ready to talk, and then I'll share. Sometimes I just text some of the stuff that I feel, because maybe reading a text and then having that pause to respond gives him a little bit more wiggle room. There's a lot of things that we've learned over the time period of us being married, but I grew up in a household where we just yelled at each other all the time, and there was things that broke and things that were never repaired and harsh words that were said. And I really think it's this, sometimes like once you pass this line of like do not cross, it becomes easier to cross it every single time. And I think that even if you've crossed that, maybe you have a conversation with your significant other or your friend or whoever the person is that you're trying to rectify the relationship, and see if, hey, maybe we never get this mad. Maybe when I'm this mad, I promise that I will not start saying things, and maybe I walk out the other room. There's little cues that you can have even in the moments of extreme anger. When Kevin and I got married, we went to premarital counseling. I think that was a requirement in the church, but I think it was the greatest thing that we did before we got married. So we talked a lot about the importance of finances. Where do you stand with children? What's your values? And that all was really good. But one thing I really got out of all of that was Dr. John Gottman is all about relationships. He has written so many books, and he has an institute about what makes a relationship work and what doesn't. And he did studies where he would see certain facial expressions, and these couples would be being recorded in a room and they were just arguing, and certain words they use, certain emotions, they were eventually able to guess who would have a divorce in the coming years. Gottman has something called the 4 Horsemen, and it is 4 different ways that you communicate that can actually destroy a relationship. And then one of them is almost a guaranteed way that the relationship will end. So the first one is criticism. So this is where you're very negative to your partner. You may say judgmental things like, you never listen, you're always late, you're never good enough. When we lead into a relationship with criticism, it's really hard for the other person to come back from that. Another one of the horsemen is defensiveness. So this is obviously when you start to be defensive of what the other person is saying. So if somebody is criticizing me and saying that, oh, I'm always selfish, then my defensive nature might say, what about you? You're selfish too. And so you see how there's no goal in trying to repair the relationship, but it is just pulling us apart. The third one is stonewalling. And this is basically where you're acting like a stone. So maybe I am saying all these things to Kevin and he's just acting like he doesn't even exist. So it's just the physical body is there, but he is shutting down. There's no response. And he is literally stonewalling me, even though I'm saying these things. There's no emotions on his face, no reaction. The last horseman is the horseman of contempt. And this is marked by disrespect, eye rolling, sarcasm, name calling, mockery, belittling. It's when maybe your partner is sharing their needs and then you just roll your eyes. But ultimately, John Gottman found that the couples that showed the most contempt, they were the ones that were on the brink of divorce. And most of them over time were the ones that divorced. So the goal is not to use these mannerisms. Now, I know when we're upset, it is so easy to throw these things. And again, if we're talking about that invisible line, if we pass that line and we're used to fighting with contempt or with criticism or with stonewalling, the goal would be that when we're in a safe space, when we're not emotionally charged, that we try not to use these things. The next time you're fighting, you could just bring up, hey, I feel like you're using contempt right now. And I know that's so weird to say in the middle of an argument, but maybe that's one way that you can sort of diffuse the situation and be hyper aware of the way you're arguing, because the goal should be that you are both trying to dissolve the issue and not just try to break each other down, because there's no solution when all you're doing is fighting at each other. For Kevin and I'm naturally an extrovert and Kevin is more of an introvert. And so in the beginning of our relationship, I needed to say everything I needed to say. And I think there was a little bit of, I don't think he was fully stonewalling, but he definitely got quiet. And what I learned is I just needed to wait a little bit and let him cool down so that we can have a normal conversation. That was really hard to get to because I needed to say everything I felt, but I learned over time that I can wait and then I can even process what I'm feeling and then only share the things that really matter that would help us to get to what is the real core issue of why we're having an argument and what can we do to resolve this and where can we be better next time so that this doesn't become an argument. When you're in the moment of just lashing out and just sharing everything, you don't really process all of that and you're just heated and emotionally just saying whatever you want. And sometimes that can come out as contempt or that can come out as criticism. And so I've learned over the 11 years that I need to be better at holding back, not always perfect, but I will try my best to wait until the situation is diffused a little bit and then we can talk a little bit better together. The third thing I wanted to bring up is love languages. So a long time ago, I learned about the 5 love languages from Gary Chapman, and I love it because I love quizzes that really help us to learn more about ourselves and our inner workings. And so I love personality tests in general, but Gary Chapman's 5 love languages really distill how you receive love, and then more importantly, how other people perceive love. I may like a certain type of love, and I may then naturally want to give love that way, but that other person may not view that as love. So the 5 love languages are acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, receiving gifts, and physical touch. So Kevin and I both took the languages of love quiz. And again, I'll put everything in the show notes. But mine was a little bit more of the acts of service and sometimes words of affirmation. For Kevin, his is quality time and physical touch. So no matter how many times I give Kevin a gift or I give him words of affirmation of how much I love him and all of this, it will not be the same as how he feels loved as when I spend time with him. So on this recent birthday of his, we spent all day long doing all the different things in Austin to spend quality time with him. And although some things were tiring or it was so hot because it's summer, we spent so much time together that he felt loved because all of us were spending the time and attention on Kevin. For me, Kevin knows that words of affirmation are important. So he has written so many different cards that are so thoughtful, so personalized, that means so much more to me because it shows the acts of service while putting it into words. What is your love language? And let me portray my love for you in the language that serves you best. And then to your significant other or your children or whoever it is, it also helps to show, I know my love language is this. So then if you can feel my love or fill my love tank by doing the things that I appreciate better. The last thing I really want to bring up, and I think is a really core reason why Kevin and I have a healthy, happy relationship, is that we really put each other's needs first. So in an argument, sometimes when I'm cooling down, I just think about, where is Kevin stemming from? How does he feel in this moment? I try to put myself in his shoes to understand, what is he upset about? Because usually when you hear both sides of the story, there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of fault on both sides. So if you can try to always come to the table with the other person's needs first, you will never be apart or you will never miss the mark because both of you are striving for each other's needs, and then it becomes more fulfilling. I know that Kevin doesn't like to do the dishes. He hates doing the dishes. I don't mind doing the dishes. So I can get in my head and say, that's not fair. I always have to be the one doing the dishes. But instead, I know there are other things he does more than I do. For example, he washes the boys more than I do. So it's these little things that if we know where the other person is, know their intent, their heart, their motives, what makes them feel loved, what makes them feel hurt, and we can come to a place of understanding and service and sacrifice. I think if both of us are coming from a place of service and sacrifice, it will inevitably make the relationship strong. And then what we try to do with our children is to teach these values and these relationships to them because we want them to be strong men in this world, and then find people that have similar values or values of respect and love and service when they find their other match and when they find their friends. I don't talk about our relationship a lot, but Kevin truly is the backbone and the rock in my life. And it is because we have a strong unit at home and we prioritize our little island of a family and we move as a unit. So, for example, if the grandparents want something that kind of goes against our unit, we may have to say sorry. And a lot of the values that we have is biblical, to be fully honest, but it is in us having a strong relationship that we can then serve the rest of the world. So it is, we can serve our practice and our team and our community because there is peace and love at home. And it's not always perfect, but I know that even if Kevin doesn't eat full carnivore, the fact that we have a strong relationship, I know the joy he feels, I think, in our family is something that will carry him through. And he knows for sure he can call me at 3 a.m. and I will take him to the hospital. I think these things are so important in holistic health. And I don't talk about relationships enough, but I do think it's so important to have values that you can really carry through that shows you if a relationship is strong, your needs are being met, your boundaries are intact, and your love languages are being heard, and that you're not hearing the four horsemen in your relationship. No relationship is perfect. We are flawed as humans, but we can strive to do better. And I think if we lead with a servant's heart or a heart that we are trying to do better for the other person. Now, I know that can risk you to narcissists, so you have to be super careful there. And I think that's why the boundaries book, again, is so important. But if you come to a place where you try to understand the other person, wonders can happen. Okay, guys, I thought the conversation about relationships was so important because it is truly connection, community is so important in the ability to heal. And remember that Harvard study was not only about your significant other, it is just having someone to really be able to connect with, that you're your true, authentic, vulnerable self, but without being contemptuous or being criticizing all the time, but being your honest, full self and being kind. Okay, guys, I hope that this was helpful. I'll put all the resources in the show notes. Make sure to eat a lot of meat, take care of your bodies, and take care of the relationships around you, because these are the things that make you well. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.